I'm going to keep it minimal. I'm going to keep it, I'm not looking to hurt countries. I could do that too, but I'm not looking to do that. But when that letter goes out, that's a deal.
Well, they have to pay a fair rate. It's all. It's very simple. They have been charging very, very high tariffs to our farmers, some over 200%.
The August 1st deadline is over, and Trump didn't get what he wanted. He warned the world, make a trade deal with the U.S. by the deadline or face harsh new tariffs. But instead of falling in line, 90 countries simply walked away. No deals, no concessions, no fear. They called his bluff. Now Trump is furious, and he's hitting back hard. He's rolling out massive new tariffs, targeting allies and rivals alike.
Starting in the United States, where the White House has announced new tariff rates for dozens of countries that have not yet reached a trade deal with the United States.
Canada, once a trusted partner, is being slammed with a 35% tariff. Switzerland, Taiwan, Cambodia, Thailand. They're all on the list, with rates as high as 39%. Trump has sorted the world into three camps: those who obeyed, those who stalled, and those who dared to defy him. If you didn't sign a deal, you're paying the price. This isn't normal trade policy. This is personal. Trump is tossing out deals, bulldozing alliances, and trying to reshape the entire global trade system by force. And the timing couldn't be worse. The economy was already walking a tightrope. Many thought we dodged a recession. But now, this tariff shockwave could be what sends it crashing down. With no plan B and no off-ramp in sight, the world may be heading straight into a storm. This could be the moment everything changes. The world told Trump no. Now he's ready to burn it all down. Before we dive into the chaos unfolding behind the scenes, make sure you're subscribed and watch till the end, because what's really happening is far worse than the headlines admit. Just hours before the August 1st deadline passed, an executive order arrived. It declared tariffs on goods from 67 countries and the European Union, ranging from 10% to 41%. Brazil got slapped with a 10% base rate plus an extra 40% linked to political motives, bringing its tariff to 50%. Canada's rate jumped to 35%. Taiwan got 20%, Switzerland 39%, South Africa 30%, and Pakistan 19%. Countries not named still face a flat 10% tariff. These tariffs were set to take effect on August 7th, giving businesses barely a week to prepare. This was no measured trade policy. It was punishment by decree. A baseline of 10% for anyone who had not signed a deal on time. Worse for those singled out by political choices. No consultations, no negotiation, just unilateral enforcement. This blunt action ignored multilateral diplomacy. Trump used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to justify it, claiming trade deficits are a national emergency. U.S. courts already ruled those claims illegal when he used them earlier to impose the so-called Liberation Day tariffs. The court held that long-term trade deficits are not emergencies. Yet here, the administration goes again, under nearly identical reasoning. This is raw overreach. The system of global trade is built on treaties, rules, and open negotiation. What Trump is doing is closer to executive fiat. The world watches in worry as the U.S. undercuts and sidelines diplomacy, with barely any time to react before the August 7th tariffs hit. But while the global community reels from the shock, the Trump administration is busy spinning a different story, one of so-called success. The administration has been eager to boast about the so-called successes of its new trade policy. According to the official narrative, a handful of countries, including Japan, the EU, the UK, South Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Pakistan, have all made deals with the United States. On paper, this sounds like a diplomatic breakthrough. But when you look closer, these agreements are far from true victories. In fact, many of them look more like PR stunts than real negotiations. As Politico puts it, Trump is squeezing these nations like lemons. Most of the announcements came right before or just after the August 1st deadline. The timing shows that many of these governments were scrambling. They weren't trying to build long-term trade partnerships. They were trying to avoid punishment. Take Japan. They agreed to lower some tariffs on car parts and industrial exports. But in return, they had to promise future support for U.S. defense policy in Asia. On top of that, Japan committed to invest around $550 billion in American projects. That's a huge price tag. It doesn't look like a fair exchange. South Korea had a similar experience. Their government accepted a deal that lowered tariffs on electronics. But they also had to publicly align with the U.S. on issues like Taiwan and regional security. These weren't trade issues, they were political demands. The European Union's deal is perhaps the most confusing of all. Instead of one clear agreement, different EU countries were pushed into separate talks. Some were promised breaks on farming rules. Others got small exemptions for auto parts or chemicals. The common thread was fear of retaliation. Most of them came away feeling they had avoided something worse. The UK found itself in a tight spot too. Britain, still navigating its post-Brexit economic identity, agreed to a limited tariff exemption on pharmaceuticals and financial services. But in doing so, it had to quietly pull back on a planned tech agreement with China, something Washington had been lobbying against for months. So while London got a small break in one area, it was clearly forced to give up ground somewhere else. Again, that's not negotiation, that's coercion. Even countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, whose economies are heavily dependent on U.S. trade access, found themselves in an awkward position. Their deals amounted to temporary tariff rollbacks in exchange for political alignment. In Manila's case, the government had to commit to increased military cooperation with the U.S. in the South China Sea. In Jakarta, the price was a quiet pullback from Chinese-backed infrastructure projects. What links all of these agreements is the way they were made. These weren't the result of calm discussions or mutual interests. They were quick fixes made under pressure. Most of the countries involved weren't celebrating. They were just glad to avoid being hit harder. India's case highlights the deeper game at play. Publicly, Trump's administration attacked India over trade imbalances and tariffs on American goods. But behind closed doors, the real tension stemmed from India's decision to continue buying discounted Russian oil after the Ukraine war began. The U.S. imposed or threatened tariffs on Indian steel and aluminum, not simply for economic reasons, but as a warning. Toe the U.S. line or pay the price. Trump's language about bringing India to the table was code for demanding that New Delhi stop making independent decisions that challenge U.S. dominance. Whether it's buying Russian energy or exploring non-dollar trade settlements with countries like Iran or China, the dollar's global supremacy is under pressure. Countries, including India, have shown signs of experimenting with bilateral trade in local currencies, avoiding SWIFT, or questioning dollar-denominated oil trades. These acts are not just economic deviations. To Washington, they are political defiance. Tariffs, in this new framework, are no longer about goods. They are about global obedience. Washington is making it clear. Trade access to the U.S. market is now conditional upon geopolitical loyalty. After Trump assumed office, Canada made a bold move. After years of staying close to the United States, Canada began to make its own decisions, even when they went against what Washington wanted. One of the biggest issues was trade with China. While the U.S. wanted Canada to fully cut ties with Chinese companies, especially in technology like 5G, Canada refused to go that far. Canada also took a different approach to climate policies and avoided getting deeply involved in the U.S.-China trade tensions. The United States didn't like this new direction, so now Canada is facing a 35% tariff, not because of trade violations, but because it started making its own choices. Meanwhile, Trump's actions are having serious effects. As Trump's tariff offensive escalated, markets reacted like they had been hit by an earthquake. Asian stock indexes plunged within hours, their screens glowing red in Tokyo, Seoul, and Mumbai. In the United States, equities stumbled as traders scrambled to assess what looked less like a trade policy and more like an economic ambush. Bond yields fell fast, signaling a sudden flight to safety and sending a chilling message. Investors are bracing for impact. The jobs report released on August 1st added kerosene to the fire. Only 73,000 jobs were added in July, a significant miss compared to the 100,000 expected. Even more damning, unemployment ticked up to 4.2%. Markets didn't just digest these numbers, they choked on them. Investors interpreted this not as a hiccup, but as the first real sign that the US economy is bending, perhaps breaking, under the weight of its own aggressive policies. These are not isolated data points. They form a pattern of deterioration. Higher input costs due to tariffs are squeezing American businesses. Manufacturers that rely on Chinese components, semiconductors from Taiwan, or metals from Brazil are now paying a premium just to stay operational. These costs don't disappear. They travel down the supply chain until they reach the American consumer. The result? US households will pay more for groceries, smartphones, tools, medicine, and even diapers. And not because they made bad choices, but because foreign governments failed to comply with Washington's latest ultimatum. Let that sink in. Average Americans are now paying for this geopolitical mess. They didn't vote to raise tariffs. They didn't ask to subsidize Washington's trade wars. But here they are, caught in a price spiral ignited by a policy they never agreed to. Across the world, patience has snapped. Canada is now openly considering counter-tariffs. The European Union is drafting emergency measures to restrict US imports. Despite the trade deal with the US, public sentiment in Germany, France, and India has turned openly hostile toward American brands as they are unhappy with the deal. In Brazil, where relations were already tense after Washington's silence on Bolsonaro's prosecution, the tariff hike feels punitive, deliberate. Deals, even when made, are no safe haven. Several nations that signed limited agreements, South Korea, Indonesia, the UK, still face elevated tariffs. It's the diplomatic equivalent of signing a peace treaty while the bombs continue to fall. The administration claims its tariff policy is surgical and strategic, a reset to correct decades of bad deals. But even conservative economists are beginning to doubt the math. The average US tariff rate now sits around 18%, the highest since the Smoot-Hawley era of the 1930s. Back then, such protectionism helped deepen the Great Depression. So, is history repeating? Officials say these tariffs could raise $450 to $500 billion in revenue. But at what cost? For every dollar gained in tariff income, several more are lost in inflation, reduced consumer spending, and retaliatory measures abroad. Foreign direct investment in the US has slowed. Export-dependent industries, agriculture, aerospace, technology, are being gutted. And allies are beginning to decouple, both diplomatically and economically. Once, America led by example. Today, it leads by pressure. And the cost is growing isolation. When trade deals are enforced at the tip of a tariff gun, they cease to be partnerships. They become terms of surrender. American businesses are asking, is this America first or America alone? Worse still, the infrastructure of the global order, WTO, G7, even NATO economic coordination, is being corroded. If every nation adopts the same posture, the result won't be fairer trade. It will be fractured markets and rising nationalisms. Meanwhile, Trump has made August 7th the new deadline for the tariffs to take effect. For countries that haven't cut deals by then, the penalty will be swift and steep. Legal proceedings are underway, but rulings won't arrive in time. Economies don't wait for verdicts. Businesses can't pause. Supply chains can't restart like a Netflix stream. And so, the question becomes, what happens after the damage is done? If the courts strike down the tariffs, will the administration reverse them? If not, will Congress? Will other countries sue the US at the WTO? What we are witnessing is not merely a trade shift, it's a geopolitical earthquake. And like all earthquakes, the aftershocks will be felt for years. If you care about where the world is headed, subscribe now and watch out for our next upload.